You wanted a deep dive into Elon Musk's mind. Well, buckle up. We're serving it up straight from Walter Isaacson's biography.
It's a wild ride.
It is. We're talking childhood trauma, relentless drive, and all the moments that made this man who he is today.
I think it's going to be really interesting to unpack all that.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've all seen the headlines, the tweets,
Oh,
and chuckle at the memes. But what's the real story behind the man who's launching rockets, building electric cars, and, trying to get us to Mars?
right, right. And what's so great about this biography is Isaacson had this unprecedented access to Musk. I mean, his family, his inner circle. So we really go beyond the public persona.
We get to understand the why, the motivations, the demons, what drives him.
Exactly.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. We go beyond the surface. So where do we even begin with someone like Elon Musk?
Well, I think what's fascinating here is that his childhood really shaped who he is today.
Oh, absolutely.
He had this really difficult upbringing in South Africa, and the bullying he endured was pretty intense.
Yeah, I'd heard about that.
Isaacson actually talks about an incident where Musk was hospitalized after this really brutal beating.
Wow. I mean, you hear about Musk's drive, his constant push to innovate. It's easy to forget that comes from somewhere.
It definitely does. And, Grimes, who has 3 children with Musk,
Yeah.
she puts it well. She says he doesn't really know how to enjoy success. Like, he can't smell the roses because he learned early on that life is pain.
That's a really powerful statement.
It is.
When you grow up with that kind of adversity, it's got to leave a mark.
Totally.
Is that where this incredible risk tolerance comes from, too?
I think it's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
His grandfather, Joshua Haldeman,
Yeah.
he lived by this motto, live dangerously, carefully. He was an adventurer, took the family on these daring expeditions, even flew a single-engine plane from Africa to Australia.
Whoa.
Yeah. And even though Haldeman died in a plane crash when Musk was still young, that sense of risk-taking, it really stayed with him. You see it in everything he does, starting SpaceX, buying Twitter.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of a tough childhood, a family legacy of pushing boundaries. How does that turn into the Elon Musk we know today?
Well, one key ingredient is his, voracious appetite for knowledge. Musk was a bookworm from a young age, disappearing into bookstores, libraries, whenever he could.
So this is more than just a cute anecdote. This love of reading, this is what fueled his ambitions.
Absolutely. It broadened his worldview, exposed him to all these big ideas, and ultimately helped him develop his own unique vision. And that vision started manifesting early. At 12 years old, he coded and sold his first video game.
No way. He was already an entrepreneur as a kid.
He had that hustle. Isaacson tells this great story about Musk convincing his dad to buy him a computer.
Oh, I bet that was tough.
It was a big purchase, but Musk insisted it was essential and just wouldn't let it go. That persistence,
Classic Elon.
that ability to see what he needs and go after it.
And that drive is ultimately what led him to create Zip2, his first big success. With his brother, Kimball, right?
Exactly. They were scrappy. They were working out of this tiny office, even sleeping there for a while to make ends meet. But they had this groundbreaking idea to create online city guides. And they eventually sold the company for over $300 million.
Talk about a success story, but with this intense drive, this, as Isaacson calls it, manic sense of urgency, there's got to be a flip side to that, right?
Oh, there definitely is. Isaacson doesn't shy away from the cost of Musk's ambition. He talks about the long hours, the impossible deadlines, the impact it's had on his personal life.
For example, give us the juicy details.
Well, there's a story about Musk visiting Starbase, SpaceX's launch site, late one night. And he found only 2 people working.
Oof.
And he was furious. It perfectly illustrates his expectations, his need for everyone around him to match his intensity.
Yeah, I can imagine that kind of pressure taking a toll on relationships.
And it has. Musk has been married multiple times, and Isaacson really explores the strain that his work ethic put on those relationships. His first wife, Justine, she even said that the qualities that made Musk difficult to live with might be the same ones that make him so successful in business.
Wow, it's like a double-edged sword. And on top of that, Isaacson talks about Musk's struggles with emotional intelligence.
Right. And his friends had this analogy of an open loop to describe his behavior during periods of intense stress. It's like he's operating without feedback, unable to process or respond to emotions in a typical way.
So it's not just about being a demanding boss, it's a deeper issue.
Exactly. And this lack of emotional awareness has led to some pretty public controversies.
Right.
Remember the pedo guy incident?
Oh, yeah, that was a mess.
It really highlighted Musk's flawed judgment, especially when he's under pressure. And Isaacson explores that incident
Mm.
as well as Musk's evolving political views.
Yeah, he's definitely been more vocal about his right-leaning views lately.
Right, and Isaacson charts that shift, including his controversial comments about woke culture. It's a fascinating contrast to his earlier, more progressive leanings.
And then there's the whole Ukraine situation with Starlink.
Right. That's another example of the complexity of Musk. He provided this crucial internet access to Ukraine during the war, but his comments and actions have also been criticized. It really shows his, evolving relationship with power and influence on a global scale.
It's almost like he's a walking contradiction. You've got this brilliant innovator who can be incredibly reckless and insensitive at the same time.
It's true. And that paradox is what makes him so fascinating. He's unfiltered, often crude, and seems to genuinely enjoy, trolling people, especially on Twitter.
Speaking of Twitter, can we talk about that whole chaotic takeover?
Of course. Isaacson dives deep into Musk's motivations for buying Twitter, his free speech absolutism, and the internal turmoil that followed.
Yeah, the hardcore Twitter 2.0 era and the mass exodus of employees. That was wild.
It was a classic example of Musk's my way or the highway approach. He had this vision, and anyone who didn't agree was shown the door.
You know, for all his flaws, you can't deny the impact he's had. Tesla's leading the electric car revolution. SpaceX is doing things in space we never thought possible.
He's undeniably a visionary.
Yeah,
He believes in his ability to solve complex problems, even if it means breaking things along the way.
like his approach to first principles thinking, right?
Exactly. He strips problems down to their core elements, questioning every assumption. It's how he's been able to disrupt so many industries.
But what's the ultimate why behind all of this? Why this relentless drive?
Isaacson probes that question, and what emerges is Musk's desire to leave a lasting mark on humanity. He wants to make life multiplanetary by colonizing Mars and ensuring our survival as a species.
Wow, talk about a grand vision. It's almost overwhelming trying to wrap your head around everything we've just discussed.
It's true. Isaacson's biography is packed with information and anecdotes. It's a roller coaster ride through Musk's life, and it leaves you with a lot to think about.
It definitely does. You've got this incredible innovator who's also capable of some pretty questionable behavior. So what does this all mean? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
That's the big question, isn't it? Does Elon Musk's impact on the world justify his often controversial methods? That's something I think we all need to grapple with.
It's a real head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you've got these audacious goals, colonizing Mars, revolutionizing transportation, merging AI with the human brain, things that could truly change humanity's course.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you've got these, let's call them unconventional methods and personality quirks that leave people wondering.
Absolutely. And it's that tension, that constant push and pull between brilliance and recklessness that makes Musk so fascinating.
Yeah.
Takes first principles approach to problem solving, for example.
Yeah.
Isaacson really breaks this down.
Okay, so first principles, it sounds a bit like something you'd hear in a philosophy lecture, not necessarily a biography of a tech titan. Break it down for us.
Right, so instead of just accepting conventional wisdom or the way things have always been done, Musk breaks a problem down to its most fundamental truths, its core elements.
Okay.
Isaacson uses the example of SpaceX and reusable rockets. Everyone said it was too expensive, too difficult.
Which in rocket science is probably really expensive and really difficult.
Exactly. But Musk approached it from first principles. He asked, what are the basic physics involved? What are the absolute minimum resources needed? And he built from there, challenging every assumption along the way. The result: reusable rockets that have drastically reduced the cost of space travel.
So instead of looking at a rocket and seeing this incredibly complex machine that costs a fortune to build, he saw the building blocks and figured out a better, more efficient way to put them together.
Precisely. And that kind of thinking pervades everything he does. It's how he's been able to disrupt multiple industries.
It's both brilliant and a little bit terrifying at the same time, right? Because it also seems like that same relentless drive, that need to constantly push boundaries, has also led to some of his, let's call them, missteps.
That's right. This relentless drive, while essential for his success, has often come at a cost to his personal life. Isaacson doesn't shy away from that. He talks about how Musk's manic sense of urgency can create a really intense, demanding work environment.
I can't imagine.
There's a story about Musk showing up unannounced at the Tesla factory at 3 a.m., expecting to find people working.
Okay, so not exactly a 9 to 5 kind of guy.
Not even close. He expects everyone around him to match his intensity, which, as you can imagine, can lead to some strained relationships.
And it's not just about the long hours, is it? Isaacson delves into how Musk's struggles with emotional intelligence have also caused friction.
It's true. There's this open loop analogy that his friends use. Imagine a system with no feedback mechanism, no way to adjust based on input. That's Musk during times of stress, according to those close to him.
So he's so laser focused on the goal, so caught up in his own head, that he can be blind to how his actions affect those around him.
Exactly. And that lack of awareness can lead to missteps, like the time he publicly accused that British cave diver of being a pedophile on Twitter. Isaacson doesn't shy away from these moments. He shows how Musk's impulsiveness, his tendency to lash out, can sometimes overshadow his brilliance.
It's like he's got all this raw intellectual power, but sometimes it feels like he's missing that emotional governor that keeps most of us in check. It's almost Shakespearean, like a tragic hero who's brought low by his own flaws.
It's an interesting comparison, and it's something that Isaacson hints at throughout the book.
Mhm.
But it's not just about emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
There's also this noticeable shift in Musk's political views that Isaacson charts.
Right. He's become much more vocal about his right-leaning views, which has definitely ruffled some feathers.
It has, and it seems to have happened relatively recently. Isaacson talks about how Musk has become increasingly critical of what he calls woke culture and the woke mind virus.
Yeah, those terms have definitely become part of his vocabulary. But what does he actually mean by them? It's one thing to toss these buzzwords around, but it would be helpful to understand the substance behind them.
Well, Isaacson digs into that. Musk seems to see woke culture as a form of censorship, an attempt to stifle free speech and dissent, especially on college campuses and social media. He views the woke mind virus, as he calls it, as a threat to open dialogue and critical thinking.
And this ties directly into his motivations for buying Twitter, right? He wanted to create what he called a digital town square, a place for free speech where all voices could be heard.
Exactly. He felt like Twitter was becoming too censorious, too quick to silence dissenting voices. And his solution was to buy the whole darn company. Talk about first principles thinking, taken to the extreme.
That's putting your money where your mouth is. But it hasn't exactly been smooth sailing, has it?
Definitely not. The Twitter takeover has been a wild ride, and Isaacson gives us a front row seat to the whole chaotic affair. We see the internal struggles, the mass layoffs, the constant changes in direction. It's almost Shakespearean in its scope and drama.
So with all of this going on, all this chaos and Musk's ambitions reaching for the stars, how has his vision for Twitter evolved? He's had a few months under his belt now, and he's made some pretty big changes.
It's a work in progress, that's for sure. And I think what Isaacson's biography highlights is that Musk is constantly iterating, experimenting, and trying to figure things out as he goes along.
Okay.
He's not afraid to make mistakes, and he's always learning from them.
So it's not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, taking risks, and learning from the process.
Exactly. He's not afraid to push boundaries, to challenge the status quo, even if it means upsetting people along the way. He wants to create a platform for free speech, even if it means allowing voices that many find offensive or dangerous.
And that's where things get tricky, right? He's walking a tightrope between open dialogue and protecting users from harm. His approach to free speech absolutism has raised concerns, and it's not exactly a clear-cut issue.
It's not. Isaacson lays out the arguments on both sides, showcasing the challenges and complexities of creating a platform for diverse viewpoints without falling into chaos or allowing harmful content to flourish.
It's fascinating to watch this experiment unfold, and I can't help but wonder, what impact will this have on Twitter's future, and even on the future of online discourse?
It's a question that hangs in the air, and Isaacson leaves us with more questions than answers. It's a reminder that the world is constantly changing, and the rules of the game are constantly evolving.
But one thing is clear. Elon Musk is not afraid to push those boundaries. He's a force of nature, and his impact on the world is going to be felt for generations to come.
Whether you admire him or fear him, you can't ignore him. He's a defining figure of our time, and his story is just beginning.
So what does this all mean? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
I think the takeaway is that Elon Musk is a paradox. He's brilliant and reckless, visionary and impulsive, a game changer, and a controversial figure. He embodies the contradictions of our time, and his story is a microcosm of the challenges and complexities we're facing as a society.
And I think Isaacson's biography is the perfect starting point for anyone who wants to understand this complex and fascinating individual. It's a journey you won't soon forget. So, if you haven't already, go pick up a copy of Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. It's a deep dive into the mind of one of the most influential figures of our time.
It's a journey you won't soon forget.
And that's it for our deep dive today. We'll be back next week with a new topic, a new stack of sources, and a whole new set of insights. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking questions.
And keep diving deep.
See you next time.